started on April 3rd, 1860. However, back in the 12th century, as Marco Polo writes, the great Genghis Khan had a system all over Asia. He had something like 5,000 horses, and I don't know how many riders could have been on that, but and he had mail drops, message drops a day apart, so it's not something new. The pony was used for message carrying and stuff up and down the East Coast. They used it during the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. Haven't got to the Civil War yet. We'll get to that. But like I say, the one that we knew started on April the 3rd, 1860. Now I want to, this is a disclaimer here, I think for some of you that may think differently, and popular opinion says that I was one of the original writers. I'm not. I think I'm just a little bit too big. But anyway, the idea of the Pony Express was Senator Quinn from California had gotten elected, and apparently he rode all the way from California to Washington, D.C. by horseback. And of course, he was concerned that his term would probably be up by the time he reached there. And maybe it should have been. But he got in contact with one of the supervisors for Russell, Majors, and Waddell, who owned one of the biggest freighting companies in the Midwest. They did go all the way into Carson's, Salt Lake City. I think they came to Carson City. Well, probably wasn't much at that time. And to Denver. I mean, this was a big thing, and even down as far as Santa Fe, New Mexico. But like I say, they were the largest, and Senator Quinn got together with the Russell, mainly because he was the promoter in the company, and they dreamed up this Pony Express thing. And of course, the senator said that he could get funding from the government to operate this. So with that premise, they went to work. They did get it started, and as they were getting it started, the government decided that they wouldn't fund it. But that's not surprising, is it? But they did it on their own. And it was a success, but not a financial success. The legend of the Pony Express, as is with most legends, is made up of half-truths and tall tales. There wasn't a whole lot of them around to dispute any of the tall tales. The writers, after the Pony disbanded, there were writers from all over claiming that they were a Pony Express writer, but there was no records that said they were. In fact, I think the latest count shows something like 100, 110 writers that they may have found. That's with there was more than that. At any one time, there was 40 going east, 40 going west, and there had to have been a turnover. There were some of them that got hurt, some of them that got killed. And although there was only one kill on the trail itself, there's some that have been hurt and died later, but there was only one killed on the trail itself, and that was a little man called Billy Tate, right out here in eastern Nevada, 14 years of age. When his pony came on into the station without him, they figured something had to be wrong, so they backtracked and they found him with a number of arrows in his body. He still had the mochila with him. And there was 6 or 7 Indians dead out in front of him. He still had his scalp too. They respected bravery, and it was one brave young man. The first rider out of St. Joseph was a young man called Johnny Fry. he was, some people say no, it wasn't. There was some Richardson or something of that name, but that there was a man that got on the horse, Sylph, and from the stables and rode down to the Pate house where their headquarters were and where the mail was supposed to start. But it was Johnny Fry that took it over. Oh my God, that was a beautiful day. The railroad, the train was about 2.5 hours late. Seemed like the messenger had missed the train somewhere or another, but they put a special one out there, and I think they averaged something like 24 miles an hour, which was unheard of, but they did get there. But little Johnny Fry, he was a showman. He was an ex-jockey, but that day he was all dressed out in silver inlaid vest and chaps and 2 6-shooters on his hips, and his horse had a beautiful saddle on it and all that. That was strictly for show. Once it got started off, away he went down to the river, got on the ferry that took him across over into Kansas. Well, all that stuff come off into the buckskins he got. This man was a horseman. He could go almost anything out of a horse. Anyway, the crowd was very, very excited about all that, which of course, and the longer the train was late, the more the crowd got, should we say, liquored up? I don't know what the women did. Of course, the women in those days, they didn't drink, right? Well, that's what I heard anyway. I don't know. Like I said, I wasn't there. The Pony Express rider, some of them only weighed 100 pounds. Actually, the maximum weight, I think, was 170 pounds altogether. This included horse, a saddle, the mochila, which is what the mail was carried in. There's a canteen on each corner of the mochila called cantinas, and that's where the mail went. There was 4 of them. And even the weapons, they could not weigh more than 170 pounds. Now, they were issued 2 revolvers, a Bowie knife, and a rifle, which proved too much weight for those horses. They couldn't move that fast. They were issued a red shirt and blue trousers. That's why we adopt this red shirt and blue trousers. However, they could wear anything they wanted. Most of them did prefer buckskins. They were warm in the winter and cool in the summer. A lot of the stories I have read, I don't know how some of those young fellows kept from freezing to death in the wintertime. But anyway, so they left St. Joseph on April the 3rd around 5:15 in the evening. Now, over in California, in San Francisco, Randall, I think it was Jim Randall, started off from there, and actually all he did was go down to the wharf and get on the ferry that was going to Sacramento. It did not arrive in Sacramento until 2:15 in the morning of the 14th. And the young man, he was the first one out of Sacramento. He started off at 2:15 in the morning. He threw that mochila on a half-broke Mustang and headed for Folsom. His idea was to get to Sportsman's Hall. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's on Highway 50, just below or above Placerville. Because a friend of his, Boston, Edson was his last name. His father was a very wealthy newspaper man in California, but all the records simply say Boston. One of the best writers in the world. But there was a snow coming. It had been raining for 2 days in Sacramento anyway, and I think that covered all the way across the United States at that time because the boys that came out of Kansas had the same problem. Through Nebraska, Kansas, rain up to their knees, and then on into Wyoming, hit snow. It seemed like the good Lord was not going to take this, you know, and Mother Nature, perhaps we can say. You have to blame it on a woman, don't you? But anyway, he went from Sacramento to Folsom in the fastest time. He did 20 miles, changing horses 3 times in the mud at night in 59 minutes. That was a record. But like his idea was he wanted to get up to Sportsman's Hall as quickly as possible because he knew that Boston needed all the daylight he could muster to get over the Sierras. That was one terrible ride. He went through a number of courses, but he was an expert rider, and he knew what to get out of the horse. Actually, the superintendent, Boulevard, has sent men ahead with mules to keep the trail open. They just run back and forth to keep the trail open. Well, at one point he got up there, and one of the mules had stepped in a hole or something and broke a leg, and it was laying across the trail. So he didn't let that deter him. He just went up around it and went sliding down the mountain on the other side of that bit and into the South Fork of the American River. But they anticipated some of this. Like I say, all this was put together in 2 months. Of course, today, if that was done, it'd probably take 5 years with all the permits and stuff you have to have. And the palms you would have to grease, this sort of thing. But then it was wide open. But the idea, they were working on this back in 1859 to get the idea going. But when they decided they were going to go ahead on it, they sent everybody across. Nevada was the worst. Through Kansas, Nebraska, even up into Wyoming, all the way down to Salt Lake. There were trails that were open. The Mormon Trail, the Oregon Trail. There were stage stops along the way. But they set out to prove that the central route could be open year-round. And everyone told them, no, the mountain men and stuff, no, you can't get any horses through there. It's impossible. You can't do it. And that was one of the big things that they went after, to show that this could be done. And I think the record states that it was done. Throughout Kansas, Nebraska, and into Wyoming, they use army horses. They use thoroughbreds and stuff like that because they were faster. And then, of course, they didn't have the rugged country to go in. And supposedly they could make a lot better time. Well, like I say, that first night, first couple days, the rain was pouring down. And actually, by the time they hit Fort Laramie in Wyoming, they were 20 hours behind. The weather was that bad. They had to swim rivers that, well, if it wasn't for the horse being able to swim, they probably wouldn't have made it. Of course, to get out the other side and take the mochilas and empty the water out of it. Because it was, and you can imagine what wet buckskins would feel like in the cold wind blowing with that snow. But they were hardy young fellows. Some of the worst country to travel in was, obviously, Nevada. Even today, when we leave Carson City after Dayton, there really is nothing. We head across Nevada. We have 420 miles to travel. We got 59 hours to do it in. There is no other towns. We think, come in around 14 miles north of Austin and 14 miles north of Eureka. And I think it's something like 40 miles east or northeast of Ely. So like I say, there's nothing out there. This year, as an example, of course, we have moonlight. We've been told that we were going to have moonlight a number of times and never did see it. But fortunately, a horse is able to travel with only the illumination from the stars. His eyesight is something out of the... Hey, but let me get back to this Johnny Fry. Cute little fellow, about low 100 pounds, who was an ex-jockey, riding through Kansas, a little place called Troy. The girls there kind of thought he was cute, and they took a shine to this little guy, but he come running on through, and they started making these little capes and stuff to hand him so he'd have something. But with a rifle in one hand or a whip, it was hard to hold on to, so they began to cut holes in the middle of this so he could, with his finger or with a rifle or something like that. And that's how they're doing it. Does sound good, doesn't it? But they were brave young men, and well, let me debunk a couple of things here. A young man called Buffalo Bill Cody. Well, then he wasn't a Buffalo, and there's really some doubt that he was all he said he was. Records only showed him working for the company for a period of 2 months, and that's when he was 14 years of age. But with a good publicist in his Wild West show, he did all these things. He made the longest ride of any rider, and all these things, and all the Indians he killed in the skirmishes. That was good. I mean, that sold his show. And it also helped the Pony Express. It kept it out there. You heard of a man called Bill Hickok? James Butler Hickok? He was not a Pony Express rider. The movies say he was. Hollywood has taken some liberties with some of these things. He was a young fellow, 23 years of age, from Illinois, who worked as a stable hand in Rock Creek, Nebraska. And actually, that's where he got his reputation started. The McCandless brothers were mean, and he'd be getting an argument with them, and he was arrested because he killed them. Some say it was ambush, some say it was a fair fight, but anyway, he was found not guilty. But there is how he got his name. Now, there's two different versions of this, but one of the versions is that when the newspaper reporter wrote about this, he wrote on there that he came on like a wild bull. When he got in the papers, it said Wild Bill. On the other one is that he had buck teeth, protruding teeth in his long lip. That's before he started growing a mustache. And the McCandless there began to call him Duck Bill. I think I would have taken offense to that too, you know. But anyway, after this fight, the paper wrote it up as Dutch Bill. Well, the Dutch got off of there somewhere, later on, but the bill stuck, so he became Wild Bill Hickok. He was not a Pony Express rider. The average age was 19 years of age. The youngest one supposedly was 11. We can't really find out much about him. But Billy Tate, the young fellow I told you about, 14 years of age, was one of the youngest riders. Well, the oldest one was 45, and that was Major Egan out of Salt Lake City. He was or the Deacons, I think, called in the Mormon, anyway. And his son, road also. Now we have the roads, the Dave and Jack roads in Salt Lake City in that area are direct descendants of Major Egan. And when I end this thing, I'm going to recite a poem that was written by Dave Rhodes. Anyway, like I say, so we do have some. Supposedly now we have a man that belongs to the Point Express and his wife will live out in Fallon. She's supposed to be a direct descendant of Major, one of the founders of the. And but anyway, one of the longest day rides was made by a young fellow called J. Kelly. He rode into Cold Springs. A lot of things happened around Cold Springs, a lot of things. He had already ridden 116 miles, and then he rested there for about an hour and a half, and they came in with another westbound rider came in, so he had to take the mail on into Fort Churchill was 117 miles. So they, with 1.5 hours rest, he did this 117 miles in I won't have it here, something like 8 hours. And like I say, this from Fort Churchill, or then it was Buckland Station. Some of you may have seen this on the road going into Yarrington, down there. Anyway, that was the original one. And then the Fort Churchill was built in July of 1860. So they could have Army troops there to protect the settlers. Pony Express riders too, I guess. Anyway, and that was made then Buckland Station was no longer. It was a home station, it was. That's where a home station is where the rider finished his route of 70 miles, 80 miles, 120 miles. That's where he would sleep and rest for the next rider that came on. The only, actually all these young men were brave young men, but only one time, an exception to that, was this was during the Paiute Indian wars in April and May of 1860. Johnny Frey came, Bob Haslam came running into Fort Churchill, or Buckland Station. His ride was from State Line. At that time it was called Friday Station right up here. And the rider was afraid to go on. It's the only one that ever refused to ride. So the station guy offered him another $50 if he'd continue on. So he rode on out to Smith Creek. He rested there, I think it was 9 hours. And the westbound rider came in, he took it back, and then right through Fort Churchill and on up to Friday Station. That was one of the longest rides of them all. I think that was something like 380 miles he did. That was the longest ride. I know I apologize for skipping over some of this stuff. Like I say, it's to get them all together. Read this paper, and you can see what a lot is going on right here. But I just can't say enough about how the bravery of these young men. This area out here was called Ambush Alley, from Buckland Station on into Cold Springs. It's called Ambush Alley. You ride out there today, so we can just take this trail and you don't see any of that stuff, but that's not the way it was then. They rode along the marshes where we see the river and the Carson River ending. Those were all marshes out there, and there was a lot more growth at that time. And that's where the Indians set up their ambushes and stuff like this. One of these young fellows, I don't know, I'm not Spanish, so I don't know how you would pronounce vowels in Spanish, or if I'm even making the right pronunciation of it. But he didn't speak English, hardly any. I mean, it was enough, I guess, to make his wishes known, but Bob Haslam was his hero, and anything that Bob Haslam asked him to do, he would do. He happened to be one of the best riders of them all. In this one particular time, he is riding through Ambush Alley, and some of them, the sagebrush, greasewood and stuff was high enough where Indians could hide behind it. But he is going on, and all of a sudden he hears the whooping and the hollering, and there they are. He pulls his pistol and fires a few, but arrows are shooting all around him. And he's riding an Appaloosa. And the thing is, these horses were rain-fed. They could move out pretty fast. They could outrun Indian horses. That was the idea. Don't fight them, outrun them. So that's why they had the best horses that money could buy. That sometimes during that era, when you paid $500 for a horse, whew, that's like what, 5,000 or better today. But anyway, he just kept on whipping his horse through. And he turned around, his horse faltered. He thought it was going to fall. He turned around and found that there was a big slash right across the horse's butt, but the blood was just streaming out and running down. But they did make it. And he went on through another, got ambushed again. And apparently one of the bullets entered above his hip here and came out this size here. And so he was bleeding pretty good. So, but he knew that he figured he would die, and he was. But he took off his neckerchief and tore it in two and plugged up the hole on both sides of his body, and ripped the edge of his seam or whatever it is of his jacket off and tied himself to the saddle. And he did make it into the next station. He's hanging over the side of it. He's out. But they couldn't save him. He did die about a day and a half later. But I can say that I won't say they didn't have any fear, but I mean, I just cannot emphasize enough. Would we do it today? Probably not. Probably not. Is there any of us that are that dedicated and that tough? We're just living in a different age. But anyway, I manage to do it twice a year. Twice. And the rewrite, I do it, I've got 2 sections I travel. And I can say, as long as I can climb up on that horse. This is my number 1 horse you see right here, that's Sundown. He's a purebred Spanish Arabian. And a lot of people say, well, I've never seen that rider bigger than the horse. But he's not that small. Or I'm not that big, except he is. And he gets me that. The other horse I use is a Tennessee Walker. But this is my number 1 horse. He's my freight horse. If I think it, he'll do it. When we hit Wyoming, that's when the Mustang came into play. They were a sturdy horse, short coupled. They had stamina that the racehorse didn't. The racehorse was good for a few miles flat out. I mean, he could really travel fast. But put him in the mountains and stuff, and he didn't last very long. One of the things they had to be concerned about then was not just the Indians, and the Indians they didn't like the idea of the white man in their territory, which is understandable. I can't call them savages because that was their life, that's the way it was. But anyway, the Mormons around Ruby Valley and Fort, they had farms out there where they grew the vegetables and food stuff with the Pony Express stations and so forth, and they sold them the horses. They had some of the best horses in the world. Out in California, they call them the California Mustang. They were really like the Spanish Barb, a small, sturdy horse, the stamina. And speaking of horses like that, they had as much heart as a rider did. A horse would give you everything he's got. If you treat him right, he's going to give you every possible thing he's got. There's one case where this one horse was ridden so hard, so fast, outrunning the Indians and stuff like that, that when he got into the station where they switched over, they put him in the corral and all his muscles just locked up. He couldn't move, so he died standing there. It just wouldn't, the muscles wouldn't get that way. I guess long distance runners have the same thing, don't they? I'm told. I'm lucky if I can run a block, or even then. I told you about Boston Hudson, where he had to get across the Sierras. That's the only name that people really knew about was Boston. The rest of it wasn't, I guess, that important. And a lot of men were like that. Pony Bob Haslam, one of his, in March of 1861, he was carrying President Lincoln's inaugural address. And it was very important that they get to California with this because California was still maybe leaning towards the south. And it depended on what Lincoln was going to say in his address that would convince him, and apparently it did because they stayed on the side of the Union. However, again, on this ambush alley, Pony Bob is riding out there. Actually, he's riding into Cold Springs. And he was ambushed. The Indians came chasing after him. And the Indians had stolen a number of horses from time to time. In fact, just about every Pony Express station in Nevada at one time was burned down, or horses stolen. And some of the horses that were chasing him that day were these stolen horses. So, fortunately, they going through this one section of willows, it narrowed down, and the only way he could not run the Pony Express horse that the Indians had. So he shot him. That's what he had to do. But he got an arrow in his arm. It hit the bone, and he just broke it off and pulled it out and threw it away. He made that one all right. A little bit further on, again, they started swarming at him from the side, and he got an arrow right through his mouth. His lips knocked out 5 of his front teeth. Almost knocked him out, according to what he says, and he was swaying in the saddle, but he managed to recover enough, and he made it on in to Buckland Station. And there they wanted him to let's get some rest, we'll find someone else to take him. In fact, the station master thought he would do it. And Pony Bob says, no, I'll do it. Just give me a clean rag. He stuffed in his mouth and bit down on it, got back in the saddle. And they say when he got to Friday Station, his arm was swollen up about the size of his thigh. But that's why it was Pony Bob. I mean, he was revered by all the young riders. He set a fine example for them. But 18 months is all the Pony Express lasted. October the 24th, 1861, the telegraph was completed. There was still some mail on Ponchila that had to be delivered, and maybe it took another 4 days, but That was actually the official name of the Pony Express, was October 24th, 1861. Now, I can go on and on about this stuff here, but maybe you've got some questions you'd like to ask. Yes, sir.
When they did their doctor, Frank Lincoln,
Yeah.
did they almost do it in 3 days less than the normal 10 days?
This man's been reading this. I believe it was 7 days, 18 hours, and some odd minutes, the fastest it ever been done. And I can say this Bob Haslam was carrying it, and that was one of the things there. He made some of the fastest time, wounded as he was and everything. But they were prepared for it. There was a horse every 10 miles along the trail. So they were prepared for it. So, I mean, it's, you know, the rider would ride 60, 70, 80 miles, but they didn't beat them up like they did normally. So they prepared for it. And, you know, that's a pretty good time. 7 days, 18 hours, and some odd minutes. Must have been a good dry month or something.
Must have a tailwind.
Yeah, I don't think they would have gone over the Sierras. But you know, let's face it, I've seen snow up here in July, so it's not something new. They would ride anywhere from 10, 12 miles in this part of the country, maybe 15. And across Kansas, Nebraska, and that, they were 20, 30 miles apart, because there were flat lands, and they were using thoroughbreds. Home station, generally they were set around 100 miles apart. And that's where a rider would rest and get cleaned up and have a good hot meal. Because during the exchange of the mochila from one horse to another, he only had 2 minutes to do this in. So maybe they had a time to drink a cup of coffee or bite on some jerky or something like that. But they'd go all day out there without food. And all water too, because they didn't carry water with them. But like the horses, you know, probably made out better than the rider did, because every 10 or 15 miles they got some rest. But they didn't run a horse out there to run him to death. They only had to really average a little better than 8 miles per hour to make their 200 miles a day. Average, that's something else. I mean, sometimes you're going 15, 18 miles per hour in order to average that, because maybe you was only able to walk at 3 miles an hour. Today we have something like 550 riders. In 1992-93, a lady over in California sued the National Association because they didn't allow women into the association. So anyway, she won. And I'd have to say today that 50% of our riders are women. I've got one of the better riders in my section. Her name is Stephanie Pallow. She will be 18. She started when she was 15. This kid can ride like the wind, and she is so proud to be a Pony Express rider. And the kid is good. She's darn good. This year, we made her a ride captain, the youngest ride captain we've ever had. And of course, she has ambitions. She wants to be the youngest president of the association. And you know, she just may make it. This year in Genoa, Lynn Heller is going to be riding in. She's going to be carrying the mail into Genoa. You know who Lynn Heller is, don't you? Dean Heller's wife? Dean was going to ride. They had a big horse all set up for him. It takes a big horse for him. But he has to be back in D.C. to vote on something. God, I wish more of them were like that, you know. It seems like there's any fun to be had or someplace to visit, they don't vote. And I think that's probably what we're supposed to be paying for, isn't it? The saddle then was nothing much more than an A-frame saddle, and it had maybe a seat on it, wooden frame, and just straps hanging off of for the stirrups, to hang the stirrups on, and cinched on. That's all the saddle was made of. It barely weighed 14 pounds. Today, well, any horseman knows that you invest a lot of money in your tack. I've got one saddle that's, I think it weighs something like 24 pounds. It's the lightest one I've got. One of the reasons for that is not just for the horse, it's for me getting the saddle. I prefer my big stock saddle, but that's like 45 pounds. And when you're going to be riding a horse out there that fast, you want to have it as light as possible. Let's face it, with the, I weigh 200 pounds. You put a 35-pound saddle on there, then the mochila weighs around 40 pounds anymore. Then it was only 20 pounds, and we've had them as high as 50 pounds, really stuffed. Whereas we make more money that way, you understand? So some of these horses are packing close to 300 pounds. So you're not going to get a whole lot of running out of them. That's why it's set up today that well, we have a pin that we give each year for that year, Pony Express pin to the rider. He only has to ride maybe half a mile in order to get that. We've got some people that ride 2 miles. We've got some of them that ride 16, 18 miles. It all depends on what you're capable of doing. Again, I'm doing it now. Am I going to do it next year? I don't know. I only ride anymore. I only do around, altogether, I only do around 10 miles. And I'll pay for it for 2 days afterwards.
Well, is it just the people who live along the Pony Express Trail?
Oh no, we've got a couple that come all the way from Tennessee. We've got some from New Mexico. We've got some from Montana, Idaho, state of Washington.
So it's just interest in American history?
Yeah, and we have 2 riders from Germany and one from how do you say that? Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia. I'm not sure it's called that. Whatever it's called. What?
Czech Republic. Those gentlemen were in Genoa last year. A couple of those, the German and...
Yeah. They are really into it. One of them rode Peter Van Check or something like that. Rode my Tennessee Walker here a couple of years ago. And I fell in love with him, but I wouldn't let him keep him. I didn't think he would enjoy the flight back anyway. Yes, sir.
With the railroad so close to completion, why did they even initiate the Pony Express?
Before the railroad wasn't completed until many years after that.
Telegraph.
Oh, a telegraph.
Oh, telegraph.
Telegraph, yeah.
Wrong
It was being built all along.
But I mean, it was a big effort to plan, and they took a long time trying to start the Pony Express, but it seemed to me they were so close to finishing the telegraph.
Well, it took a year and a half.
Well, that's not very long. It took them longer to plan
But
it.
in the meantime, like I said, they didn't want to lose California. They were afraid of, because of the Civil War was moving.
Okay.
And there was, I can say, and Senator Quinn sold this idea to Russell, and Russell took it on. His partners did not want to do it, but they did do it. See, I think it was called Central Overland California and Pikes Peak Express. Anyway, we came to something later on, I think, that people called it clean out of cash and 4 pay, something like that. Because they were over $400,000 in debt when it ended. So, I mean, it was financial ruin for them. The only one that I think had ever really recovered from it was Majors, because he was a merchant, and I think he started up another business, but the others died in poverty. Russell was not too well thought of. He was supposedly had made a couple shady deals with some attorneys back in Washington, D.C., and selling stock that he didn't have. Little things like that sound ridiculous. Anyway, they started like that. They wanted to do it. Many people think that the Pony Express ran for a lot longer than it did. It just seems that way. But like I say, the legend, the legacy, it lives on. And I think it was the first ride was done in 1935. In fact, I've got a belt buckle from that era. And then that was all, just the one time. Of course, like I say, Hollywood has taken liberty with some of this stuff. Well, as an example, I can't remember what the name of the movie was, but it had Charlton Heston and Forrest Tucker as Buffalo Bill and Wild Bill Hickok. You imagine two big guys like them depicting a Pony Express rider. It just didn't happen.
On the re-rides, you guys ride in the daytime, you camp out? You
We
ride
ride 24 hours a
you
day.
go right straight through it?
Yep.
Okay. But the riders that are riding 10 or 12 miles and pass it on to the next rider, then they come back, or they...
What are they going to do?
Okay, so somebody out there picks them up and brings them back?
Oh, yeah. Like in my case, my wife is my driver. I mean, she follows along behind me. Which in some places this is really good, especially if you're getting close to a highway. If they're behind you, no one's going to come around and pick you up. Today I took my Tennessee Walker out of Fort Churchill down to Simpson Road because that was the first time he's ever ridden that section. I just wanted to get him familiar with it. And we have, about a quarter of a mile there, I guess, where you're on pavement. And the drivers are going like at least 65 miles an hour. But fortunately, my horse doesn't pay any attention to him. If this little black spot here, though, that kind of scared him, he'll put his butt right out in front of him. But he's not afraid of them, but he's afraid of a little bit of a drill. I've never been able to understand that. Yes, ma'am.
What's in the bag, and is it the same bag that goes from Sacramento to St. Joseph?
Yes, it's called a mochila.
Yeah, and what's in it?
Mail.
Who's sending mail from Sacramento to, and they don't want to just send an email or pop it in the snail mail?
I guess because they want to have their mail carried by the Pony Express.
Is that a special stamp?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a special stamp. And these letters today, you can still buy them, put anything you want inside of them, but they're still $5 for a letter. And we carry those, I think last year there was something like 800 of them.
There was an article in the Record Courier about it, that you could do that.
I don't know what the particulars are down here. I've never sold one. You have one?
No, but maybe it's nothing, I don't know if you've explained it or not, but each state has their own, like Nevada has Pony Express, California has their own groups,
Well, yeah, I mean, we have 8 states, and each one of them, they're called divisions.
Yeah.
California division, Nevada division, Utah division, Wyoming division, they're called a division. They're not all the same people. In Nevada, We have anywhere from 140 to 165. Now we count the radio people in that 165 too.
And you guys still do captains of each, like a
And
group?
a section, yeah, they're called ride captains.
Yeah.
Like for an example, Bob Moore fixed the mail up at Woodford's. He's the ride captain on that, and he's the ride captain until he gets to Carson City. The ride captain there is Debbie Royer. She takes it from there to Fort Churchill. Stephanie Powell picks it up there and takes it to Top Gun, that's below Fallon. And Nancy Hogarth will take it on there over to Sand Mountain. Over Sand Mountain, Barbara Rosenberger takes it. And from Sand Mountain to Grub, Cold Springs, from Cold Springs to Grub Wells, I believe it is. Mike Ryan is handling that. Then Steve Notterman picks it up there, goes at Roberts Creek, and going on over to, you know the name of that hill up there?
Oh God, it's been years since my dad was a captain, so it's like, because we had the Fort Churchill to Fallon section, so
Who is?
Dan Icky, he was a president many years ago.
It was before my time.
Yeah, it was like in the 70s, 80s.
Okay, see, the National Pony Express that we have today was formed in 1978. I was telling you a little bit earlier about this, and I think in 1960, the Pony Express rode all the way from Sacramento to St. Joseph. And if you've been to the museum down here in Carson City, it's a Nevada State Museum, I guess it is. Their names and everything are on that bronze flag in front. And in 2010, we celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Pony Express. And this year, they're doing something a little bit different. It's going to come a train, not Pony Express, but they're going to send a mochila from Washington, D.C. And that mochila then will start in St. Joseph, coming this way.
Larry, I'm sure you'll stick around and answer questions that people might have. Any more?
Yes, ma'am.
How much of the original Pony Express route is road now, considering all the interstate highways and private properties?
Well, we try to stick to it as much as possible. As an example, in Dayton, down the River Road, developers built over the Pony Express Trail. We didn't know that there was a trail there for the Pony Express. Sure they did. But anyway, you know, you can't stop private enterprise. I mean, it's private property and stuff, but we work around it. It pretty much what we parallel Highway 50 on the other side of Fountain. And then veers off 14 miles above Austin. There's most of the people that we run across are very cooperative. You open a gate, close the gate. It's that simple. Some places, the ham radio operators almost cannot get, but they managed to follow down those trails pretty good, except down where the Shelbourne riders. There's some real rough country out there that you can only get to with horses. They have 140 miles that they have to travel, and I think they've got, was it 26 hours or something like that to do it in. It's fantastic. Those people out there, it's only been recently when I was president of the Pony Express Association here in Nevada that I got a vice president out in eastern Nevada, because those people out there were all rebels. You know, they wore what they wanted and all this kind of stuff, so we have a little more control over it now, and they feel more like they belong. But it's rough, but it's fun. That's the only thing I can say. It's fun. Okay.
I hope this year no one calls me at 5 o'clock in the morning. I don't know if it was you or Dale last week and said we're running 8 hours behind or something.
Yeah,
Last year,
probably.
it was Dale Ryan called me. My phone rang at 5 a.m. and he said, I'm sorry to tell you this, Sue, but we're running 8 hours behind. Well, it worked out though.
Let me tell you a little bit of something here. I don't usually talk about schools, but in this particular case, this particular ride captain had a school for a lot of years. It's 26 miles to cover, and sometimes it took her as long as 7 hours. That's why we got behind. Well, found out that she really wasn't the rider that she said she was, and she would mostly walk across there. And she wouldn't let anybody get ahead of her. She had to do the whole thing. But it's not going to happen this year. In fact, the ride captain we have out there this year, Nancy Hogard, is an endurance rider, and she said, I'll do the whole damn 26 miles by myself if I have to. And I think she would do it, and she would do it in 4 hours.
You know, Larry, I was really impressed by the number of ladies that you mentioned as ride captains.
Oh, yeah, well,
And we have a book called Women and the Pony Express in our
there was no
books.
Pony Express riders then.
No, but women, no, it's written now. In fact, Marlena Hellwinkel, who was a former president of PCHS, is on the cover of that book. So you might want to check out, we have quite a few Pony Express books in our Main Street bookstore. So
I'd say at least 50% of our riders today are women.
that's great.
And, you know, I don't know, they just get out there and do it. Some of them,
Oh, yeah, I brought it for you.
okay,
I
thank
thought
you.
they did all the time.
And, you know, I did make a statement here that I really do like. I mean, for you to put it up here, you know, I don't like having age in there, but that's beside the point. I'll do it as long as I can crawl in the saddle. Age is a state of mind, although your body doesn't always agree with it.